Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
Okay, here we are. Welcome back to part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, I recommend that you do first. You'll get a good sense of, just a bit about Yuriy and... am I saying your name right, by the way?
Yes.
Is it
yes.
Yuriy? Yeah.
Yuriy,
okay.
Right.
So you don't really pronounce the Y. It's just Okay. Get a better sense of Yuriy, who he is, his journey. We talked about your transition from lawyer to your first startup and your experience in Y Combinator, and then now into AiSDR. So and at the end I was alluding to a question I wanted to ask. So kind of you talked about the light bulb moment that you had, for want of a better term, for AiSDR. But I'm really curious. So now that the technology is there and it's improving all the time to facilitate that role in many ways, of an SDR to a level which and at volume now which a human being really can't compete with. What do you see the future of human beings in roles like that being over, especially the next sort of few years, in the advent of a technology like yours? And let's be honest, you're not the only company out there doing something like this. So what does that? How does you see that playing out over the next sort of few years? Do you think?
Yeah. So I think everyone will actually get what they always wanted, right? So most SDRs in a role, they always want to grow up to become account executives, right? And basically, instead of doing the routine tasks of like prospecting and going through the motions, talking to people, closing deals, getting commission on that, right? And I think this is eventually where we're going to get, where AI will be handling the routine parts of the job, right? So finding people, researching people, doing the outreach across channels. And then depending on the level of complexity or the way you want to set it up, you can either have like a person reaching out to a prospect that basically has engaged with AI to, in a positive way, to like give them a call, invite them for a coffee, right? Convert them super fast. Or even kind of having like a fully autonomous process up until the point where a person just shows up to a meeting to book a demo, to like hold a demo and kind of close the deal. The question that is the logical one, right, is will we need that many AEs, right? So, and in my opinion, yes, we will. Coming back to where we started with you, I believe there will be more products, right? So people will be starting like indie hacker projects, right? There will be more products. People will be buying those products, and somebody needs to be selling those products. And in that world, AI will be like doing the outreach, generating the demand, and people will be closing, right? Something that people are uniquely equipped to do, connecting with other people, closing the deals, convincing. But the outreach itself, I think it will be kind of fully automated. The question that I still don't have like a really strong answer to is essentially how we will figure out the training part of it. So essentially SDRs are very often like a talent pool for AEs, right? So they learn the product, they learn the sales process, and then they become AEs. And we're basically saying like, okay, that part will not be required. So how we will figure out the recruitment, the talent management, and the kind of process is still unclear to me. My vision for now is that essentially we will have a much smaller kind of subset of kind of SDRs, working on bigger accounts where like AI outreach is not an option or not a favorable option. And then B, we will have like a team of SDRs working with the prospects that have shown interest in the AI outreach, as I mentioned kind of previously, right? So those doing the calls, having the conversation, just like seeing what that convert. So essentially, what we will start seeing is, instead of the usual structure where we had 10 SDRs and then 5 AEs, right, or something like that, we will start seeing a situation where we'll have 5 AEs and then maybe 2 SDRs who are in AE trainee role essentially, and then kind of AI just taking care of that demand.
Yeah, I'm glad you've laid it out like that, because that's broadly kind of what I've been thinking. Because there are a couple of problems there, right? There's that one you mentioned about SDRs being that talent pool, being that what's the word? Kind of producers of best practice, of good practice early on as well. But then also, and I think you've very elegantly come up with a solution there. But also beyond that, and then the space that I'm in is this idea that AI is only as good as the data you give it.
For sure.
And so my concern is, and again, the problem that we're solving is, I think that you need to ensure that there are always humans somewhere embedded within that profession. Because you need actually to be taking what they're doing and feeding that back into the models, to keep them continually trained and refined on the newest methods. Because, as you know, the sort of trends within outreach and sales as a whole, ebb and flow. They change. There are certain, ways of constructing copy, for an outreach campaign last year that don't work this year, and you know what I mean, and and maybe even just the product and the specifics of that, and even things like regionality, dialect, and there's so many elements of it. I think you need to have that continuous loop, and I'm betting my business on it. Basically, you need to have that continuous loop. So that idea of always having that small group of SDRs, I mean, essentially managing the AI team in some ways, and being that feedback loop. It's like you maybe need those team leaders there, and then, like you say, then that people can be sort of drawn up from that in a kind of cyclical fashion into the account management role. But I suppose then the next logical question from that is, let's say that's sort of, I don't know, 5 years from now, that we're going to see those teams, and also the other point that I forgot to mention as well is, yes, we're obviously going to have a lot more positions available for account management positions and account executives, because the whole point of AI SDRs is it's going to generate a shit ton more leads, right? So there's going to be more deals that need closing. You're going to need more closers. So, or at the very least, more people doing demos. So there's that too. But I guess the next logical question then is, let's say this happens over the next 5 years or whatever. Well, then isn't the next logical step AI account managers? Isn't the next logical step? Because, I mean, if we see some of the trajectory that technology is going in, I mean, we're already seeing some pretty decent AI avatars that can do some pretty convincing work. We got AI voice, really doing amazing stuff. I mean, is it really too crazy to assume that the next wave is going to be AI performing the demos and doing the negotiations and doing the closing? I don't think that's a crazy thing to imagine, right?
It's definitely not a crazy thing to imagine, but I don't think it's going to play out like that, right? So basically, there will be AI avatars doing AI demos, but what it's going to be is like a personalized, fancier version of self-serve subscription, right? So basically, you can go to a website and you can talk to an AI avatar, ask questions specific to your kind of situation and product, get answers, subscribe, right? And this will be common, right? So I think this is happening. And basically AI will be this kind of assistant, and it being AI will give an advantage, because basically what's going to happen is people will not be concerned about being sold to, right? They will basically just go there to get more information specific to their use case, their product, etc. Where I think AI will fall short consistently is being able to sell, because the ability to sell like human to human is not based on the ability to like answer questions. It's based on the ability to tell a compelling story based on how I read the person in front of me, right? And that's a very nuanced thing, right?
And a very human thing.
Very human thing, right? I've done like hundreds of demos, right? Maybe thousands at this point of time. And there are so many things that you cannot train for, right? Because like you have to learn to listen, right? Not what person is saying, but what person is implying, right? And then basically go after the problem the person is implying versus the problem that the person is describing. And AI currently, and I think for some time, is still going to be as good as the prompt, essentially, right? So basically, how well you can explain the job at hand. And I think a high quality sales conversation demo cannot be explained with rules because there are so many nuances. Now, let's imagine we get to an AGI, right? AI that is better and smarter than humans. I still think it won't be kind of focused on that. Because that would be like shooting birds with a bazooka, right? But moreover, I think there is in the sales process, the fundamental value is trust, right? It's not mechanical. It may be transactional on that self-serve aspect, but beyond that, it's trust. And trust is an emotional aspect, which I don't believe we will ever give to AI, right? Because we want it to be better than us, and emotions are a weakness because they cloud judgment, but they are also what makes us human. And essentially, this is why I believe that kind of an AI, right, is not happening apart from the kind of advanced website FAQ like pro chatbot for higher ticket self-serve sales,
which is kind of almost bleeding then into onboarding, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, advanced onboarding. Okay, well, let me play devil's advocate with you then on something, because I actually see this as potentially becoming something of an arms race between buying and selling, right? So let's play out the scenario. Let's say AiSDRs take over and we're 5 years down the road and every single company in the world is using an AiSDR. Wouldn't it make logical sense then that companies react someone creates another startup which is an AI procurement specialist? Because if every company is using an AiSDR to try and flood your inbox, your DMs, whatever, there has to be a response to that. I mean, we see that throughout technology, throughout the ages, right? And so it has to be something that can see what your needs are as a company, understands your budget requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it can be pretty detailed. And to some extent, I know that products like this are already in development for things like the military, government, et cetera, where, procurement is huge. A lot of money is wasted for being mismanaged because of, the way people deal with it and make mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not too far to, off reality to assume that will probably happen. We end up with a situation then where really who AI SDR agents are selling to, they're selling to procurement AI agents. They're selling to buyers. So again, if we play that out logically, well, then what you were saying about selling being a uniquely human trait because of the emotional intelligence that's needed to do that, like you said, the narrative, but also picking up on very sort of subtle tells, in a human being, like reading between the lines, some level of instinct. Doesn't that kind of go out the window if, in the end, maybe the buyers are the ones to implement AI to just do the buying process? What if they just say, we've got an AI agent that's just going to show up to the demo, and it's just going to get the cold, hard facts from the demo, and then it's going to report back? Like, do you see what I mean? So it's kind of like, what then? That's my devil's advocate question too. What then?
Yeah, totally get it.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
So, a few things here. First, I actually want to be a person to build the AI procurement manager down the road as well.
Okay, that's the next one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that vision of the future, right?
Yeah.
Where basically you will have both the sales side and the procurement side automated. But I do not believe that people will ever trust AI to buy software for them, right? Because we always think that we know better, right? Like, this is also like a part of human nature. Like, we are the apex of evolution, right? Like, we know better.
The thing is that you say that, but I think people would have said the same thing 30 years ago about navigating their trip while in a car, right? Like, we're never going to replace the map. I know the best routes. I know the best shortcuts. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that's what someone would have said back then, and now look at us. We trust our entire journeys with it. So I don't know.
Maybe, right? But I think that kind of navigating is slightly different problem, because when navigating, you don't spend money, right? And if basically you trust it in a core assumption that it will deliver you to the end point of destination, like, then essentially whether you're going to get there like 10 minutes faster because you know the shortcuts or 10 minutes later doesn't really matter that much. In buying, you cannot have the same level of trust, because very often the solution that has all the best kind of technical requirements and the right price is not the best one for your company, because, for example, it has a higher risk of failing because this is like a super early stage startup, or a company who has no track record in your previous field, or you just like jumped on a call with a sales rep and they seem shady, right? So people will take all of that into account when thinking, and they will be much more cautious because the implications are broader than just like getting to a destination point. And then the previous experience is much more layered than just gonna crafting a path through a bunch of streets, right? It's very easy for me to believe that if there is a thing in space that knows all the possible routes, right, it can find a way to my destination, right? But it's much more difficult for me to understand that, like, okay, there is this AI technology that has read everything there is to know about this person, about this company on the internet, but I'm not sure it knows things that are not on the internet. And people who are selling don't tell all the important things on the internet because they know AI is going to read it. So I need to go there and probe myself. And essentially, like, what my vision for this is essentially what's going to happen is the procurement agent is actually going to be much more difficult than the sales agent, because it has to be like super configurable. Like, here are all my requirements, but I want to have like a list of top 10 with explanations why you picked them, and also all other solutions that you considered with reasons why you did not pick them. And what is going to happen for a long, long time is essentially like a human buyer training, where essentially it's going to tell it, you picked this wrong because of, you missed this because of. And then over time, this buyer will actually understand what your company needs, and you will start trusting it more. And then potentially you can start recording calls, feeding those calls into the procurement kind of engine, then explaining to it which parts of the conversation you actually used to determine that this is the best fit, and then eventually it will become autonomous. But this procurement,
I love that you just said that, because you just described my startup.
right.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then eventually, kind of what's going to happen is you will have your own AI buyer that is trained exclusively on your buying preferences.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly my philosophy from both the buying and the selling perspective. Like I mentioned earlier, like, I think that it's not enough to. I mean, when we start getting into those higher levels of interactions, it's not enough to just have an off-the-shelf. I think that we're going to see, very much in-house, or at the very least in-house trained with, AI agents at different levels for different roles, that are continuously learning from people for a significant amount of time. So when people get concerned about, are they going to take our jobs, I'm like, no, it's going to take a very, very long time for them to learn from an enormous amount of data first from a human being. They need to shadow the human being in the same way that you train another human being to do a job. They need to sit, watch you do the job, ask questions, and you need to be telling them not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And being very, very specific to the AI, because it is a lot more binary, obviously, being a machine than a human being that can maybe read between the lines. But once you've done that enough, then it may be somewhat successful. But again, it's still going to need to have that regular input, because things change, right? Priorities change, and the way that people do things change. But it's interesting, man. It's really interesting to see where we could be, and now we're talking 10, 15 years, I think, probably down the road. But it's interesting, and the fact that you've already thought about that. So that is that your third potential, your third YC?
I think that's going to be like
a natural progression of what you're already doing, maybe.
Yes, a natural progression of AI is basically like a second product line. Because
interesting.
an unfair advantage that we will have is having access to a lot of sales data, right? So instead of kind of reading on the internet and not being able to understand, like, how does it actually work? We will know, right? Because we have all of that data on the sales side of things, and we can say, like, hey guys, we have buying insights beyond what's public. That's valuable.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, and it's on a per company basis as well. We're very aligned there, I think, with our thinking in the way that it's going to play out. It's interesting because I wonder, how that might trickle down to just the regular consumer as well. Because obviously, from a B2C perspective, human beings make buying decisions all the time, and that's another huge nut to crack for people and for companies. How do you sell to people? That's obviously huge. We've now got platforms like TikTok doing crazy numbers when it comes to selling, through their online shopping channels. And I wonder if, again, there may be, from a personal AI assistant level, something that's going to happen there too. I'm already hearing of startups in the the world that I'm in, and I'm sure you have too, of AI home like managers to monitor spend and things like that, and then to maybe make suggestions on things that need to be purchased for the house, whether that's goods, whether that's utilities, recommending to switch gas provider or whatever it might be, So if you, again, play that out logically, you kind of end up in a similar place where you have potentially this idea of AI agents who represent you online, making these, not maybe making the decisions outright, but these assistants, essentially almost like personal assistants, personal shoppers, who just know what it is you need, understand your budget, your requirements, etc., and then just going out there and making those decisions. I honestly wouldn't see it being long, actually, until we see an AI shopping assistant type, well, no, personal shopper, where every now and then you'll just get a load of parcels at your door for different clothes and shoes. You try them on, and the ones you don't like, you send back, and the ones you do like, you keep. Like, because people already do that anyway.
Yeah.
So then it's just like, stuff like that. I think we'll see those incremental changes there. That would be interesting to watch too.
I would bet on Perplexity shopping for that.
Perplexity shopping.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know they had shopping.
They launched it like last week.
Really?
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So basically, Perplexity has their special kind of finance product, and what they launched in beta, I think like last week or 2 weeks ago, is Perplexity shopping. Right. So basically, this is what I'm looking for. Perplexity, find me the best kind of vendor and kind of the best offering. So I'm very curious to see kind of how all of this is going to play out. But like I would bet on Perplexity on that personal shopper space, and I agree with you. At the same time, I also feel that the shopping as it is now won't die, right? Because like, again, so many people that I know are like, yeah, all those recommendations, like they're trying to trick me, right? I know what's better, like,
Right.
And it's in the back of the shelf always, right? Like, and this is kind of the thing that I think is going to protect the classic e-commerce / shopping experience, but majority will eventually shift to kind of AI shopping.
But you already see it
sense.
now. I mean, with Google, for example, the top search results there now. I mean, Google's come under fire now for last few years for just basically completely spamming the top results with paid ads, and it just means that it's not entirely organic. It's not based on what is necessarily the most popular in those categories or whatever, and it's kind of skewing the results. So it may be that we end up in a similar place with this, and therefore the distrust of those results may be warranted. For someone to say, actually, I don't trust Perplexity or ChatGPT's recommendations, because I know that these are the companies that have paid the most money to be there and get those results. But equally, there are always going to be those purists, right? Like, people still collect vinyl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and there always will be those. And I think, like, from someone who used to be an ex-chef and that cooks day to day at home, like every day, I cannot order food online. I can't. Like, I have to go to the store. I have to hold the products in my hand. I have to look at it, and then I enjoy the ritual of shopping as well. Like, it's something I enjoy. I come up with recipe ideas as I'm shopping. I have my list, and I always buy way more that's on the list, but I want to hold the tomato and go, okay, that's firm. I want to hold the banana and see, okay, yeah, those are good. But when you buy them online, I've tried it before, like, you just get a bunch of crap. So.
Yes, right. And you know what's the best part of it? It's just being human, right? And you can potentially put all our lives in equations. And honestly, now I believe it's possible, right? And we're getting like really close to that point of time where if we wanted to, we really can like just sit back and relax and kind of see what happens, right? Like, let technology do it for you. But we won't, because we don't really want that, right? We actually want to go shopping. We want to try that cashmere. Like, maybe I don't actually like that cashmere for the touch, right? Or like, sit in that car, right?
Yeah.
Talk to that sales rep. Maybe, right? I'm just too old, right? And essentially, my kids will say like, Dad, you're so old school, right? Like, let Perplexity do it for you, right? Like, don't go shopping. And this just takes an evolution, right? So basically, kids who will be taught by AI, right? So we've seen a couple cases where basically ChatGPT is already like a tutor for kids, like on math and other kind of things. So I think once those kids grow up, they learn to trust AI as the kind of sole and only source of truth. And then, like, everything done by AI just makes total sense, right? So
that is an important perspective to have in mind, that, like, nostalgia is a dangerous thing, right? And yeah, from our perspective, we would agree on the fact that there's always that desire for human touch. But yeah, in reality, I mean, if you're looking at a Star Trek like future where you've got replicators that make your food, no one's going to need to go shopping. So then what I've just said there is kind of point, like, you know what I mean? So, like, not to say that that's going to happen, but you never know. Like, so yeah, and like you say, the trust level thing is very different. Yeah, because if for example and also what you're buying too, because I imagine it's, the good thing about technology, it usually eliminates boring tasks first. So if the boring tasks of, I don't know, finding the best deal on insurance, or finding the best deal for your like electricity provider or whatever, like, no one really enjoys that buying process. Like, that isn't one where you're like, I really can't wait to speak to that sales rep. And you know what I mean? Like, no one's saying that. Like, you just want to get it done. You want the best deal. So you start automating that stuff first, bit by bit. It can start doing other stuff. And like you said, I think, yeah, maybe young kids will see, as they become adults, will see shopping as like, yeah, they want to touch the fur, but actually the way they do it is they get 5 products sent to them. They feel them all, they wear them all, and then they send back the other ones, and they would just send to them. They never even really had to ask for it. The AI just said, hey, winter's coming up soon. You've got, you haven't got a new, you threw away that coat last year. I've automatically sent you these options. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and that experience is good enough because it's done the thinking for them. So it's more about preempting, I guess, what people might need and want. And then just the experience changes,
Yeah, and I think this will happen, right? And it is inevitable, because basically our kids will be more exposed to it. They will trust it more. They will be the ones who benefit the most, who will be most transformed kind of by AI, because we have this kind of memory of the past where you had to figure it out on your own, right? They won't have it. My concern would be, like, will we lose the ability to think critically, right? Like, that is my biggest concern. But again, that won't be my problem.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think that you can say that now anyway. Like, that there's a concern about whether or not we're losing the ability to think critically, and I think that's been a problem for a while. I'm not sure if AI is going to be the thing that swings that one way or another. I think that that's a bigger problem, less to do with that's more of an education issue rather than an AI issue. And if anything, like you said, with AI being able to do some of the things it can in education, if anything, it could potentially solve that from being a problem and help people develop their critical thinking skills better. Because obviously the problem with education is there's a limited amount of teachers, there's a limited amount of good teachers. The education system is very good at destroying teachers' enthusiasm. But if you have a teacher that is able to relentlessly be full of energy, always be on the best form, and can teach things like critical thinking, I mean, in theory, you end up with generations that are better because their teachers are better. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that, as long as educational institutions embrace it in the right way and implement it in the right way. I guess that's the key, isn't it? We just can't control how people implement things. That's the issue. And also, there's the concern about hidden agendas within these things too, right? What are the safeguards against that? Like, what if an educational institution has some, I don't know, unusual ideology, which we see sometimes, unfortunately, and decides to try and indoctrinate, children in that particular way of thinking or particular, ideology? That's a concern, because it would be very easy to disseminate that throughout a series of AI agents, to a bunch of kids, and probably go unnoticed. That would be my biggest concern. Yeah, but we'll see. What's So with AiSDR, so I mean, how long has AiSDR been running for now?
15 months, something
Oh,
like
really?
that.
That it's. Oh, yeah. You told me that before. Yeah, I was surprised then, and I just reminded now. It's relatively young. So how are things going broadly with it? I mean, what stage are you at? What kind of what kind of ground are you
Yeah.
breaking? What's your trajectory?
So it's going really well, right? So we have 120 customers,
Wow.
and we're adding dozens every month. So growth is good, demand is good, product is moving really well. Biggest problem is churn, which we are solving, right? So something that I see happening in this AI SDR space, because there's, like you mentioned, dozens of companies that do what we do, but they take the outreach problem too simplistically, right? So basically, here's like a polo lead list. Here's a prompt like create an email for this pain point, send, right? That's not what high quality outreach is, right?
Yeah.
And like many founders of the AI SDR startups, like it feels they've never done it themselves manually, right? And they just see this like, oh, this is how it's done. Like I read it in the book, right? And blast. And as a result, the conversion rates are terrible, right?
Mm.
And therefore, there is a churn problem for all of the kind of AI SDR products out there. The biggest difference is that my main focus is to figure it out as soon as possible versus grow my business as fast as possible, right? So, and this is why we see like this super explosive growth in the AI SDR space, like companies having like millions in ARR in like less than a year, because everybody wants like pipeline on autopilot, no need to hire, like let's do that. But I can easily see that like 12 months from now, we will see some really ugly crash and burns in the AI SDR space, because that will start churning, right? What I'm doing differently is I'm keeping myself honest, right? So I have customers churning every month because my contracts are month to month, super flexible. You can cancel anytime. You can kind of pause at any time, whatever you want. And when my product is not working the way it's expected, I feel it, right? Like this month. And this makes me kind of work really hard on kind of fixing it, because otherwise I won't be able to grow. And this is kind of something that I believe differentiates us from most kind of other products and players in the space. And something that has been a big focus on in my head recently is how do you go beyond here is like Apollo, here is email, like go do it, to actually like, okay, what is the best practice currently in the world to build a lead list? Like how granular do you want to go? What are the configurations? Basically, currently it's clay, right? How can you do like an 80/20, 90/10 version of clay inside AiSDR? Then when you go to messaging, like, okay, what are the top performing sales frameworks right now? And you just go and LinkedIn's of like top performing sales coaches like Josh Brown, etc. Like, can I replicate this with AI? And that's kind of what we did. Like, what is the best practice kind of on deliverability? What is the best practice in kind of figuring out the messaging, like using AI to understand your audience pain points, transforming that into those messaging structures, etc. And this is something we've invested a lot of time in lately, right? Like not just taking a very simplistic view, but going really deep on every aspect of it and understanding like what makes it work. When does it fail? When does it work? And then making sure that we incorporate those tools that make it work and as a result can increase conversion. And I see that number like trickling up consistently in our system. And this is kind of the direction we're going to be moving in on all fronts, right? So increasing conversion rates and keeping the contracts month to month to keep us honest.
So are you saying then that you're trying to build sort of more tooling that is more closely associated to the likes of Clay, or that you're working towards integrations or potential integrations with tools like Clay, or both?
So both, right? I would say.
Right.
So we're not integrating with Clay. We're not planning to integrate with Clay, right? But we want to replicate a precise. We're working. We have already kind of achieved meaningful success in replicating precise list building in AiSDR similarly to Clay.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
And when you say precise list building, what do you mean? Just accurate data, up-to-date data?
Accurate data, precise kind of industry segmentation, right? So for example, like 2,000 industries versus like 200 industries. Signal tracking, right? Being able to research companies online and use that for the outreach and qualify, disqualify your lead list based on that, right? So many other kind of similar elements where you get not just all the people in, I don't know, like B2B SaaS in the UK, but people in, not all people in software in the UK, but like companies in B2B SaaS in the UK that has been founded like in 2023 and have like less than 20 employees and have recently hired a new sales rep, right? So you can get to that level of precision in list building with AiSDR right now. And this has been really transformative for the conversion rates.
So without the need to use third-party tools like Apollo for right, okay, so just the all-in-one solution essentially. Yeah, interesting. What about the sort of issues with the spam filters on various email clients, you know, being upgraded and all that? I mean, how is that having a fairly negative impact on you know, conversion rates or even deliverability and things like that?
Yeah, of course, right? But again, we're not the only ones solving this problem. And the way I think about it is like, who is doing the best job, right? And if you research it, right, then you will see that kind of the leaders in the space are currently like smartly and instantly. How are they doing it, right? Dive into it, understand it, replicate it, right? I don't want to compete with them, right? Because they focus on one problem. I want to have like a complete solution, right? Like,
yeah.
I think that kind of with AI, we will go beyond the piecemeal software stack, right? Like people want results. People don't want like, oh, this is my lead list tool. This is my email verification tool. This is my kind of email sending tool. This is my LinkedIn sending tool. And somehow they will integrate with each other and my CRM. People want results, right? And with AI, we're at a stage where we can deliver those results. And what we need is to make sure that we have like the infrastructure set up on one platform, the lead search set up on one platform. And then we have kind of AI that has consistent access to all of those pieces and understanding of the best practices and can just like execute and deliver results.
Yeah, that's smart. So with AiSDR, I'm assuming that aside from all of that initial lead research, the quality of that data, etc., there then comes a point where you need to tell the platform what to do and how to do it. So is that in a traditional prompting fashion, or does that require giving it a ton of documentation, like, or is it a mixture of those things?
So it's on the customer side, the way it works is we give them a library of kind of top performing sales outreach frameworks, like how the emails are structured. And we give them like LinkedIn links to like who's the author and kind of things like that. And then a way to like copy their own framework or like email, and then AI will mimic it. And then they feed data about their audience, value prop, case studies, and FAQs, if any. And then from there, we have a really complex chain of prompts that kind of analyzes the audience, the value prop, the case studies, the messaging style, and then builds a master prompt for the outreach, for that audience, for that campaign, for that style, for that product, right? So on the customer end, it's super simple. On the back end, it's super complex. And this is kind of my philosophy behind the product generally, is hide complexity, because people want easy, right? People want to like play, like get meetings booked, everything works, right?
That's why ChatGPT did so well, because it's not like that was new technology that's been around for a relatively long time, but it was the interface that made all the difference. You enter a line of text in a bar and you get your answer. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Which is not always true, right?
In theory. Yeah.
And this is kind of my philosophy behind the product, and this is kind of how it currently works in AiSDR. And then you can we have the most configurable interface for prompting, right? So if you are a prompt engineer, we have a couple of customers who are prompt engineers. They write their own prompts, right? They use our structures, our overall approach, but they write their own prompts. And it works well, right? Doesn't work better than ours, right? So we're yet to find kind of someone who can prompt better than we do, but it's possible. And you can go into as much detail as you want, but the number of customers who want to go into that depth, 2 out of 100.
Yeah, because that's the whole point, to do the heavy lifting. Otherwise, at that point, you'd probably just better off writing the email. Right?
Yes, very often.
Yes. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the churn issue then in this space. I mean, one thing that I was thinking of when you were explaining that a moment ago as well was, how it could leave a potentially bad taste in people's mouths too for what AiSDR can do for their businesses if it doesn't quite deliver the way people expected for whatever reason, like all of the number of reasons you said, which I know you're addressing. Then that, what it's like, that can stick, that must be a concern to you too, that there is some sort of reputational damage that everyone is collectively doing to this particular industry for maybe not finding innovative ways to solve these issues.
That's true, but people want this really, really much, right? People really want it. To the extent that I have customers coming to me saying, we've tried 3 of your top competitors, didn't work out, we want to try with you.
I'd be insulted, why are we fourth?
Maybe they have better marketing, right?
Right, yeah.
Right. The question is, where did they stay, right? And if they stayed with us, then doesn't matter when you come to me, you stayed, and then I'm going to build a case study saying they tried this for players, and then they stayed with us, right? So and here's why. And this is where we want to get. So people want it so much that they will keep trying. And yes, there will be a bad taste after churn. But you know what? Everybody understands that this is early on. They are not happy today. They will come back a year later saying is it better now? Yes, it is, right? And here's what we can do for you now. We see it everywhere across AI. There is high tolerance for risk because there is so much reward if it works out, right? You don't delete ChatGPT after it lies to you for the first time or for the first dozen time, right? You just say stupid technology, when it's going to get better, right? And you enjoy those moments where it gets it right? So it's the same, right? We just have to power through it, right? Make sure that we are mindful about our burn, right? And we get through this uncertainty phase and consistently work on improving the product so that when the next customer comes, we can say yeah, you're going to get your first meeting booked in the first week, guaranteed.
I have a theory that I want to throw at you as well. Another one of my famous thought experiments that what you tend to see happen in trends in professional cold calling tends to be reflected very well as to what works in email outreach in terms of approaches and frameworks and things like that. Do you broadly agree with that? Or have you not really thought about that?
So I'm not that good at cold calling, right? So therefore I cannot knowledgeably comment. Okay. What I know is that there are like, I don't know, two big schools of thoughts, like permission-based openers or like no permission-based openers, right? And essentially, I am the no permission-based openers school of thought follower, right? I think that if you're cold calling someone, like you have to be assertive and somewhat aggressive till the end, right? Otherwise, like you should send a text message or an email, like, "Can I please call you?" Right?
Yeah.
When somebody picked up, like, grasp that opportunity, right? But it's just one man's opinion, right? There is like an entire book written on like how to cold call with PBOs. I know that like permission-based emails go to trash,
Yeah.
with the speed of light. and kind of good emails are more like Google ads, like, oh, like this subject line seems interesting. Oh, this first line seems intriguing. Like, oh, this kind of call to action seems low effort, right? So that's kind of the thought process versus like, oh, I'm like sorry to bother you with my unsolicited email, right? And so I don't know if there is alignment, but again, if you only
I had a feeling you might say that, but if you ignore the opener and just the I think the main content of it, I think is where there's trends you often see. So the approach for once you've been given permission or not to actually then say what you need to say or ask the questions that you need to ask. I've found over the years there tends to be that there's a very similar trends in the way that cold callers, and I mean, high-end professional cold callers are approaching that versus high-end SDRs are approaching that. There's similarities that follow along in trends quite often. That's what I've observed. Yeah, the opening or not thing, and like you say, that's a debate that's gone on for a long, long time. I'm of the school of thought that it depends on who you're calling. Personally, I don't think it's a black and white answer. I think, depending on you should know your audience and choose a permission-based opener or not based on that audience, because I think they do work, but in two different audience types. But that's just my observations.
Again, zero experience, close to zero experience in cold calling. I think that this is like one of the hardest jobs out there, right? Yeah. And in terms of the kind of, again, something that
in the corporate world, by the way, I just want to caveat what you just said. I agree with you, but in the corporate world, because I think there are much harder jobs out there in the world.
Oh, for sure.
But I just wanted to make sure, because people watching are probably commenting, like, what about working on an oil rig or being a firefighter? I'm like, no, in the corporate world.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saving me from that.
Being a nurse, or being I fucking like 1,000 things, being in the army. But yeah, no, cold calling is harder than all of that.
Well, like people who get yelled at a couple times a day for cold calling may say that like they have some reasons to argue that they do have the hardest word.
Well, they would be wrong.
Yeah, they would be wrong. Yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah, first world problem. But sorry, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
No, that's totally fine. So, as I was saying, like the difference, I think, in the format in cold call versus email is in the synchronous communication and kind of instant feedback, right? So in the email, your goal is to kind of grasp the interest for a response. In cold call, right, it's also true, but you can instantly get the feedback, right? So essentially, when you go with like problem focused, like again, like Justin Michael method, like, are you the person at a company responsible for X, right? Yes, I am. Great. Like, how do you solve this problem right now? We don't, right? Or whatever. We don't have this problem. Like, are you happy with the existing provider? So you can have that conversation navigated dynamically. Over email, you can't do that, right? You basically have to get their interest from the first touch point in a way, in a format where it's so easy to just like, because there is no peer pressure of like, hey, like there is a human on the other side, like I should not be like too bad to them. So with email, trash, mark as spam, whatever. So I think on the fundamental level, yes, right? Talk about problems, soft call to action, right? But I think those are just truly fundamentals of sales outreach. And they have been like that for years, right? I think what changed a lot closer to the sales calls, to your point, is that the strength of the call to action in email has been consistently degrading, right? So basically, you could
Yes,
have
100%.
gotten away with like, hey, this is what I'm doing, let's chat, like book a meeting. And now you basically have to go with like, what do you think? Right? And that's it, right? Because you need to get at least some engagement to then start to work off.
Yeah. Yeah, always say, yeah, does this sound like a problem that you're experiencing? Yeah, and it's a tough one, because if you hear a lot of mixed philosophies on CTA on that, which is go in for the kill, be aggressive, just ask for the meeting, don't waste people's time, versus just get them to engage, get a conversation going, use it as an opportunity to build rapport. And again, I would argue it depends who you're targeting. Because if you're generally speaking, my advice, and you might, I don't know, I'd be interested to know if you think my advice is good on this or not, because it's been, I've been saying it for a while, but I might be wrong now. If you're going for someone who's generally a lot busier, so maybe C-suite or something like that, they tend to want to get things that are to the point, and a very direct and clear, possible next course of action, which would be, let's hop on a call, let's discuss this, versus say head of a department, team leader, manager, something like that, which they probably want to engage, have a bit more information, give you an opportunity to ask questions before they commit to something like that. Or they may even be passing it on to an entirely different person anyway to take that meeting, so it wouldn't be even appropriate to ask them that. So that tends to be the advice I tend to give. Just the busier the person, get to the point, offer a meeting. Usually you can get that all done in 2 emails, which I've found often to be the case, versus the others, which, a bit longer. I don't know, does that sound about right to you, or have I been giving people the wrong advice?
I think that this is one of the kind of key things that I've learned, is that there is no golden rule.
Yeah,
right?
know your audience to some extent, but yeah, you won't get it right for everyone, because then there'll be, like even what I just said then, there'll be those that, that completely doesn't work for.
Exactly.
But you can only do so much, right? You can't, unless you have their buying data, that how they've previously bought, you don't know, right? Which would be an interesting place to get to. Yeah. Well, listen, we've amazingly sped through that and run out of time, which is insane. Because I could continue talking to you for hours, but I'm sure you've got better things to do than continue to talk to me.
I have actually a back-to-back call.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'm going to let you go, but it's been great seeing you. And when we end, I will just let you go. So don't worry about hanging around after the call or anything. I normally do that, but you need to run, so I'm going to let you go. But I do have another question. I'm going to have to put your brains on message, because it's something that's kind of an offline question that I wanted to ask you. But thank you so much. I'll put your LinkedIn. I'll put AiSDR in the description so people can check you out. Anywhere else I should be directing people to, or any people you want to shout out, or anything at all?
LinkedIn is my main channel, and thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation. Super interesting, and I think I will have a couple notes to work on and to think on after this. So
good. So excellent. Well, we can pick each other's brains after the fact. I'm sure. Yes. I'm sure we will. Awesome, man. Well, good luck with your next call. Have a lovely week, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon for a non-public conversation.
Sounds good. Yes.
All right, man. Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe. Or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.